Ember, and that's the first time I met Marcus Webb. I was fighting a wildfire in 130-degree heat when he refused to evacuate the research station because 3 years of sauna and desert climate data was burning in a server that could only survive another 40 minutes without power. I didn't know his name yet. Didn't know anything except that I was Lucas Chen, 26. 14 hours into a double shift with the Phoenix Fire Department's elite Wildland crew, and some stubborn researcher in khaki shorts was about to get himself killed over laptop files. The fire was massive, the Superstition Ridge Fire. Category 4. Moving northeast at 15 miles per hour through Pippin juniper forest that hadn't seen rain in 6 months. We were doing structure protection at the research station, a small cluster of buildings nestled in the foothills, where the Nature Conservancy ran long-term climate studies. The wind had shifted twice, meaning evacuation orders came down fast. You need to leave, I told him, still in full gear, sweat pouring down my face under the helmet. The heat was suffocating, amplified by the wildfire drawing in superheated air from the surrounding desert. Now, your data isn't worth your life. The backup generator's out, he said, not looking at me, just staring at the server room like he could will the power back into existence. If we lose this server, we lose everything from 2020 to forward. 3 years of temperature readings, precipitation data, species migration patterns. I don't care if you lose the Rosetta Stone. I grabbed his shoulder. The khaki was so hot it nearly burned my gloved hand. Out, now. He finally looked at me, dark eyes, sweat streaming down his face. This expression of absolute stubborn refusal that I recognized because I saw it in the mirror every time I suited up to fight. Something I probably shouldn't be fighting. I need 30 minutes, he said. You have 10. The wind changed again. We're evacuating the perimeter. Then give me 10. He already had a laptop out, was plugging cables into some kind of external power bank. The main server is isolated. If I can get the critical files transferred to this backup, we can rebuild. But if that server burns without a data transfer, it's complete loss. I should have physically removed him. Protocol dictated I should have. Instead, I found myself saying, 5 minutes. That's what we have before my crew pulls out. You move faster than that, you get left behind. He moved faster than that. Watching him work was like watching a surgeon in an operating room. Precise, efficient, hands flying across the keyboard while his eyes never left the progress bar. Around us, the fire was getting closer. I could see the orange glow intensifying through the windows. Hear the roar of it eating through the forest. 3 minutes, I said. 2 minutes, he replied. Eyes locked on the screen. 90%, the other firefighters were running toward the truck. My captain was shouting my name. The air temperature was climbing past 135 degrees, and the smoke was getting thick enough that visibility was dropping fast. 1 minute. Done. He yanked the laptop from the desk, the backup drive still connected. We're good. We're clear. I grabbed his arm and ran. We made it to the truck as the first wave of fire crested the ridge behind the research station. Not a dramatic, cinematic moment, just the heat suddenly intensifying to something that felt like the world was actively burning around us. We drove hard down the canyon road, me watching the fire in the side mirror while Marcus sat in the jump seat, clutching the laptop like it was his child. You're insane, I said once we were far enough out that my hand stopped shaking. You're reckless, he countered. You stayed back there with me when you should have been on that truck 30 seconds earlier. Someone had to make sure you actually left, and I'm grateful. But that was dangerous. He finally looked at me, really looked at me, and something in his expression shifted from panic to something else. Assessment, recognition. Why did you do that? You don't know me. Because you clearly weren't going to leave on your own, and I couldn't live with that. I kept my eyes on the road. And because anyone that willing to risk burning to death for their work understands something important about why I do mine. The Evacuation Center was set up in a high school parking lot in Tempe, 20 miles south of the fire zone. 50 firefighters, 30 evacuees, emergency services working overtime, and the 118-degree heat. It was the kind of controlled chaos that feels normal after you've been doing this long enough. Marcus found me 3 hours later, when I was filling a water station for the next crew rotation. I wanted to thank you properly, he said. He cleaned up, changed into borrowed clothes, but his eyes still had that shell-shocked look of someone who just watched 3 years of work nearly burned to ash, and apologized for almost getting you killed. You didn't almost get me killed. I made a choice. I handed him a water bottle. I'm Lucas, by the way. In case we're past the whole evacuation zone hostility thing. Marcus Webb, environmental consultant, Sonoran Institute. He drank half the bottle in one go, and I'm definitely past it. I'm actually very grateful. And he hesitated. I'm also kind of a disaster right now, so I understand if this is weird timing. But I've been running on adrenaline for 6 hours and I keep replaying the moment you grabbed my arm. And I'm pretty sure I'm attracted to you. I laughed. Actually laughed, which probably wasn't professional. But the situation had moved past professional about the time. He'd refused to evacuate a burning research station. I'm pretty sure I'm attracted to you too, I said. But I'm also on my way back up to the fire line in 20 minutes. And I smell like diesel and failure, and I won't sleep for another 6 hours. So maybe we do the grateful thanks thing and exchange numbers and revisit this. When neither of us is an active disaster. Fair. He pulled out his phone. But I'm not letting you disappear. Wildland firefighter guy. I've got too many questions about the recklessness. And I've got questions about the stubbornness. We exchanged numbers. I went back to the fire. He stayed at the Evacuation Center, helping coordinate supplies and updates with the research team that had lost their station. To the Superstition Ridge fire, the fire burned for 11 more days every night. During my break shifts, Marcus and I would text. Nothing romantic at first, just logistics. How's the fire progressing? Did they get the evacuation complete? My team's holding at the North Ridge. We're doing structure protection for some cabins. The data transfer worked. We saved 94% of the server. That's amazing. You're amazing. By day 4, the text shifted. You working tonight? Yeah. 16-hour rotation. Wish I could send you cold water and terrible jokes. Send them anyway. How do you make a firefighter laugh? Set them on fire. That's the worst joke I've ever heard. I know, but it made you laugh. How did you know I was laughing? By day 7, when the fire was finally contained, I keep thinking about you out there. The heat, the danger. I know it's your job, but it terrifies me. That's new. I'm here. I'm safe. And I can't stop thinking about you either. When the fire was officially out and we were doing final perimeter checks, I texted Marcus, "Can I take you to dinner? Somewhere with air conditioning that costs more than $8. His response came immediately. Yes, but somewhere where you don't look like you've been fighting fires for 2 weeks straight. And I don't look like I've been having an existential crisis about climate data. Tomorrow night, I wrote back. The restaurant was in Old Town Scottsdale, upscale but not pretentious, with cold water glasses that never emptied and AC that felt like a miracle. Marcus had cleaned up better than I'd ever seen him. Dark jeans, a button-up shirt that made his shoulders look impossible, eyes that caught the restaurant's low lighting and did something dangerous to my chest. You look really good, I said, which was pathetic, but it was true. You too. You're not covered in ash. He smiled. That's an improvement. Fair point. We talked for 2 hours. Real conversation. Not the adrenaline-fueled stuff at the Evacuation Center. He told me about growing up in Colorado, how he'd become obsessed with climate science after his hometown had massive fires. When he was 16, how he'd gone to Cornell for environmental science, worked for the Nature Conservancy, ended up in Arizona because it was ground zero for climate change in North America. I study it, he said, because I need to understand it. Because if I understand what's happening to these ecosystems, maybe I can help save them, or at least document what we're losing. That's why you stayed in the burning building, I said. That's exactly why. He reached across the table, let his fingers brush mine. I know it's illogical. I know the data isn't more important than a life. But it felt like if I lost the data, all those years of work, it was like the dessert itself was losing something it needed. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. I turned my hand over, let our palms meet. I do the same thing. Fighting fires. Staying in situations I probably shouldn't stay in because if I don't, people lose homes. Communities burn, and I can't live with that. So we're both obsessive about things that could kill us. Seems like it. That's probably not healthy. Probably not. I agreed. But it's honest. He leaned across the table and kissed me. Soft, deliberate, the kind of kiss that feels like something important clicking into place. When he pulled back, he was smiling. I'm really glad you grabbed my arm, he said. I'm really glad you were stubborn enough to make me have to. The next 3 weeks were structured around my rotation schedule. Days on the fire line, days off where Marcus and I would meet usually somewhere cool. Because Phoenix in mid-June was genuinely trying to kill everything that moved. We'd go to air-conditioned museums, late-night diners. His apartment in Tempe where we'd sit under a ceiling fan and talk about everything. He told me about his family. Father was an engineer, mother a teacher, both very supportive when he came out in college. I told him about my Chinese American, second generation. Parents who'd been thrilled when I joined the fire department and even more thrilled when I brought home a man. They want to meet you, I said one night, stretched out on his couch with my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. That's fast. That's how my family works. They know I'm serious because I'm talking about you. Are you serious? He was running his fingers through my hair, and it made thinking difficult. Yeah, I looked up at him. I know we met 3 weeks ago during a wildfire. I know the circumstances are weird, but I've never met anyone who understands this. I gestured vaguely at the space between us. But what I meant was everything. The work, the danger, the refusal to compromise on what mattered. I love you. Is that insane? Probably, Marcus said. But I love you too. So we're both insane. He came to meet my family 2 weeks later. My mom made enough food for 20 people. My dad grilled him on his career trajectory and environmental policy for 45 minutes, then announced he was acceptable. My younger sister simply said, "He's hot." I approve, which was peak embarrassing, but also very on brand. By July, Marcus had moved into my apartment. By August, we were talking about next year me potentially transferring to a less intense rotation so I could have more consistent time off. Him taking the sabbatical to write a book about climate adaptation in the sauna and desert. We could travel, he said one night, lying in bed at 2 a.m. while the air conditioning hummed. I could work on the book, you could rest, and we could actually have a life that isn't structured around fire season. That sounds perfect, I said, but I need to finish this season first. 3 more weeks of peak fire danger. I know. He kissed my forehead. I hate it, but I know. You could come to the next evacuation center, I offered. Help with coordination. Be nearby. I'll be there, he promised. The Prescott fire started unexpectedly the last week of August. A lightning strike in a forest already stressed by drought, combined with winds that made predictions impossible. It blew up from contained to Category 5 in 36 hours. My crew was called in on data. Marcus wanted to come with me. I told him no, it was too dangerous, too unpredictable. He fought me on it anyway, because of course he did. I need to be there, he said. If the research sites are in the path, they're not. The wind is pushing it east. Your sites are safe. Then let me help with evacuation coordination. Let me do something. I grabbed his shoulders. You help by staying safe. By waiting for me. By being somewhere I don't have to worry about you. That's what you do. He hated it, but he agreed. The fire was brutal. 14 days of 16-hour shifts, extreme heat, wind that shifted without warning. We lost to structures despite our best efforts. We saved 43 homes. The mathematics of it made sense until you thought about the 2 that burned anyway. On day 11, I got a text from Marcus. Fire just jumped the eastern perimeter. New evacuation zone. One of my research sites is in the path. I'm going up to try to salvage field equipment. I called him immediately. No, absolutely not, Lucas. 3 years of field data is exactly as valuable as the data you tried to save during Superstition Ridge, which is to say, not as valuable as your life. I was off the fire line, sitting in a truck drinking terrible coffee. You're not doing this. You would do it. That's different. How is it different? You risk your life for structures. I risk my life for research. How is it different? I didn't have an answer. Because it wasn't different. It was exactly the same. And I suddenly understood why he'd been terrified the entire time I was fighting fires. I'm coming down, I said. I'm pulling off rotation. No. I don't want you distracted. I don't want you worried about me when you should be focused on safety. His voice was steady. The way it got when he was being logical about something that required extreme stubbornness. I'm going to go. I'm going to be careful. And I'm going to be back. But I need you to trust me the way I've learned to trust you. That killed me. Because he was right. This was the deal we'd made. You could do the work you believed in. And I would trust you to come home. You have 4 hours. I said finally. That's all the time the fire gives you. You get those files, you get back, and you text me every 15 minutes so I know you're alive. I'll be there in 2. He promised. He made it in 1 hour and 58 minutes. Covered in ash, field equipment loaded into his truck. Hands shaking not from fear but from adrenaline. I pulled him out of his car and held him while the fire burned orange on the horizon. You're insane. I said, you stayed in a burning building for data. He shot back. We're the same, yeah. He said, holding me tighter. We are. Epilogue. 3 months later, sauna and dessert in November is perfect. 75 degrees, clear skies. The kind of weather that makes living in Phoenix actually make sense. Marcus and I drove out to the research station, now rebuilt and hardened against future fires, to do some volunteer work with his team. You remember this place? He asked, pointing at the server room where we'd met. Hard to forget the most stressful meeting of my life. Best meeting of mine, he corrected, taking my hand. You know what I realized? If you hadn't grabbed my arm the day, I would have stayed too long. I probably would have gotten hurt. And if you hadn't trusted me in August, when I went back to the research site, we wouldn't have made it past the first crisis. We're just going to keep having crises. I said, that's who we are, yeah. But now we'll have them together. He kissed me there in the rebuilt research station, with the desert stretched out beyond the windows and the sky turning gold as the sun set. 6 months from the day we met in the worst circumstances, and everything had changed. The fire that almost took the data had brought us together. The crisis that nearly tore us apart had shown us we could survive anything if we did it as a team. I love you, Marcus said simply. I love you too, even when you're being the most stubborn person alive. Especially then, he smiled. That's when I'm most myself. We walked out of the research station hand in hand, watching the desert turn purple as the sun disappeared. Fire season was ending. Winter was coming, and we would face it whatever it brought together. That's not a bad love story. That's exactly the one we needed.